Hello everybody and welcome to A Court of Words and Pages. My name is Natalie. So today I'm going to be talking about books I've read and loved and wish I owned a copy of. So a bit of context for this video. I've always used my library so much. Most of the books I read are from my library. The house I grew up in was a short drive to the library, and the house I live now, there's a library that's like a 3-minute walk up the street, and there are like 4 or 5 other libraries that are a max 15-minute drive from here. So I go to a lot of different libraries. So for a lot of my life, there's been no need for me to really collect and buy books that I read until recently I've decided I want to build a book collection of books that I love. So today I'm just chatting through some books that I want to buy because I loved them so much when I originally read them, and I just want to reread them over and over again. So the first one is kind of like the last 3 books in a series, and that is 3 Dark Crowns by Kendara Blake. So I have super fond memories of this book. This was one of the first books I read that got me into young adult fantasy. I read it in like December of 2019. Absolutely fell in love, and so over like the next month I finished the series, but I didn't buy the rest of the books in the series because I didn't have the money to do that at the time. But I absolutely love this, and this is one of my favorite fantasy series, so I just want to like have the books so I could reread them if I ever wanted to. This book is set in a world where every generation a pair of triplets are born to the queen and they are the heirs. Each daughter has a different power they are able to control, and then when they get older, they have to fight to the death to become the next queen. And this book is just following a generation of triplets and how they may change this world. I like kind of the complex family bonds in this book because while the sisters aren't raised together, they're raised separately with people who help them kind of train their magic. Each girl feels kind of like a connection to her other sisters, but then they also know that they're going to have to kill each other. I absolutely love this book. It was like kind of on the darker side for fantasy, which I wasn't expecting going into it. I read this with some of my best friends. We had a little book club we did at lunch for a few months, and this was one of the books we did, and it was just absolutely amazing. And I really wish I had the rest of the books in the series because it bothers me how I just have this first one, even though I've read the whole series. So the next one that I wish I owned is much more of an emotional read. I don't think I cried while reading this, but I will talk about a book I cried during later in the video. But this was a contemporary story that I just found to be so beautiful, like just masterful and just heartbreaking. And that's It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. So in this book, we follow Lily, who's had a hard life. She's had to work through her childhood. She had a bit of an unfortunate home life when she was younger, but she got out, got to college, and now she lives in Boston as a flower shop entrepreneur. And one night she meets this man named Ryan, who's a neurosurgeon, and they have an instant connection, except for that Ryan has a no dating bond, and Lily finds that she wants to help him break that, and she's really excited at this prospect of being with Ryan. But then when she has this budding relationship with Ryan, this man named Atlas, who was a boy she knew when she was younger, she helped him out due to unfortunate circumstances he was in, and the book is just kind of the story of the 3 of them. So it's kind of told in a dual timeline, once in present day, and then in letters Lily wrote as a young child, kind of about her experiences with Atlas. And this book does take a twist at one point in the story, so do look up trigger warnings for it, because it may be triggering to specific people, but it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful and just heartbreaking. This book deals with quite a sensitive topic, and I think the way that Colleen Hoover dealt with this was just gorgeous. This book definitely kind of makes you look at certain relationships and things that society has painted a certain picture of and really given you a different twist on it, but like not in a way that makes it acceptable or okay, but just trying to give you more insight into this. The main character, Lily, is an interesting character. You root for her, you want the best for her, and she's a really enjoyable character and a really likable person. And she is placed in a lot of tough decisions throughout this book, and it's really sad to see her have to go through and make these decisions. And I just think it was a beautifully written book and a very important book. It deals with a very important topic that I can't disclose because it would be a spoiler, but it sounds interesting. I would recommend it. It's very good. Next up is another all-time favorite book of mine. Made me sob my eyes out while reading it, and that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. So this book is a retelling kind of the Iliad and the Trojan War, but focusing specifically on Achilles and his best friend Patroclus. This book is told through the eyes of Patroclus, and we follow him as he is exiled from his home and sent to the castle where Achilles lives. And we watch a friendship blossom between the two of them and how they form a connection that's a bit deeper, and their relationship blossoms into something more. We really follow them grow up through their teen years until Helen of Sparta is kidnapped by Paris and Greece goes to war to get her back, and Achilles and Patroclus have to go along with them. And it's beautiful. The writing in the story is gorgeous. Madeline Miller's writing style that just conveys the feelings and emotions of being in ancient Greek was amazing. This is one of those books where I just can't stop thinking about it. Ever since I first read it, it's just been in the back of my mind, constantly pressing, making me want to reread it. And this is just such a fan favorite book. It's truly amazing. And you don't have to have any knowledge of the Trojan War or ancient Greece to read this, because I didn't. No, I actually just finished up learning about Greek mythology in school, so it was really interesting having read kind of this book. Well, I know it's not completely accurate to Greek mythology and stuff like that, but it's really interesting. So this book is heartbreaking. The story of these two boys, Achilles and Patroclus, were just two beautiful characters, and the relationship and the way Madeline Miller kind of followed it was gorgeous. And this is another book that I just can't recommend enough. I wish I owned it so I can constantly reread it and just cry my eyes out every day. Moving to a bit of a happier note, another contemporary is The Rest of the Story, which is by Sarah Dessen. Sarah Dessen is one of my favorite contemporary authors. Her books are just so relatable, and I've been reading them ever since I was a young adult, and just they're books I constantly reread because they're such good depictions of growing up as a teenager and just having all these conflicted feelings about your family, boys, and your friends, and they're just good. And most of them kind of deal with a harder subject, which I think adds some interestingness to the stories. And I love her characters, I love her main protagonist, and then the love interest in all of them. Probably another one of hers that I'm not going to dwell on too much, but I would also really recommend is Dreamland. Once again, look up trigger warnings for that book, but it's another beautiful book that deals with an important topic. But the rest of the story is a bit of a lighter one. It's her most recent release. It came out in 2019, and I've read it 3 or 4 times, so this is a book I'm already very attached to, very much in love with. So in this book, we follow Emma Saylor, who, it's just her and her dad. Her mother has been dead for many years, but Emma has these memories of her mother. Most of them have to do with the lake her mother grew up on. And then one day, unexpectedly, Emma gets sent to live at this lake for the summer. And partially we follow Emma as she sees these two conflicting people of who her dad and her friends all think her of, and then who her mother's family, who she doesn't really have a connection of, think that she is because of the few times they've experienced her and because of what they know about her mother. And then, of course, there's a boy named Rue who she was best friends with when she was younger at the few times she visited the lake, and he's going to help her kind of find where she belongs in this world, in this lake community, and maybe fall in love. So this is another book it's a lot of fun, but it deals with harder topics like who are you? Identity questions, can you be multiple people? Dealing with the loss of a parent as well. And I really enjoyed it. Sarah Dessen's books, usually they either have a conflict between mother and daughter or father and daughter. There's always a conflict. The main character always has a conflict with one of her parents, and that's definitely still present in this one. Emma and her father go through it a bit, but this book is just a fun book. It's such fun to relive and see this girl exploring a place she's only really heard about and has no memories and falling in love with it. And it's a lot of fun while still dealing with some more important topics. So I absolutely love this book and wish I owned it. Another fantasy book that's on this list is House of Earth and Blood, the first book in the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. This is another book that I just absolutely love. I read it at completely the right time. I read it during quarantine and just fell in love. I reread this book once and am fighting the urge to reread it again, so love that. I loved the world that Crescent City was set in. I loved Bryce. I loved Hunt. I loved all the characters. So in Crescent City, we follow Bryce, who is a bit of a party girl. She's living her best life with her best friend Danica, and they're living it up. Then one night, something terrible happens in Bryce's life that changes the course of her life. We flash forward a few years later where Bryce is asked to investigate and try to figure out this man who has been causing this string of murders, and she's assigned a guardian angel named Hunt Atlar to guide her. And maybe there's some tension there, and maybe they're gonna fall in love, but just maybe. And so this book really just follows Bryce and Hunt as they're trying to figure out who is causing the string of murders, and then they find something terrible, a dark power that's threatening the city, and they have to work to figure out who's causing it and how to stop this. So there is a major event that is detailed in the synopsis, but I think pretty much all fans of this book have agreed that it's better if you don't know that going into it, so I'm leaving that out. God, I love this book. Something Sarah J. Maas puts into a lot of her books that she handles so well with is grief and getting over loved ones that you've lost and blaming yourself and how to live with yourself after something happened that you're holding yourself accountable for, even if maybe it's not your fault. And the way Sarah J. Maas deals with that is fabulous. Hunt and Bryce, their romance between them, oh, it's the best kind of slow burn in this book. So I absolutely loved this book, and I am so excited for the sequel to come out next year. I'm just on the edge of my seat waiting, so I'm going to need a copy of this book so I can reread it like at least 3 more times before we get Crescent City 2. And the final book is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Really, you could replace it with Daisy Jones and the Six, but we're going to go with The Seven Husbands because I'm currently in the process of rereading Daisy Jones and the Six, so let's talk about the one I'm not rereading, and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So in The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, we follow Evelyn Hugo, who is this notorious film star from the 50s, and she had 7 husbands, but she's never, explained why. She's never really gone through her life story until one day we follow a reporter, I want to say her name is Monique, but don't quote me on that, who is randomly asked to interview Evelyn as she will give her life story. So this book is we're following Evelyn as she recounts her history and her life story and with these 7 husbands. And then it's also Monique trying to figure out, well, why was I selected for this interview? I'm a nobody. Why would the famous Evelyn Hugo want to talk to me? And my God, this book is just amazing. Taylor Jenkins Reid has this talent of writing fictional people who you just think, yeah, those are real people. Evelyn Hugo feels like she was real. I finished that book and I was okay, now I need to go watch the movies that she was in that she talked about. But then you remember, wait, she's not a real person. These movies were never made. She was never a celebrity that people grew up idolizing. And it's fascinating how good Taylor Jenkins Reid is at that. Evelyn Hugo is just an amazingly told story. Her life story is just so interesting to read. And as someone who is very nosy, I like to know everyone about everything. So this just satisfied that all about knowing the details, even though it's a fictional person, if that makes sense. And I especially want to reread this book now because Malibu Rising, which follows one of Evelyn's husbands and her family and his family, is coming out I think in July. So I want to reread that so I can have the context for Malibu Rising. Even though I think some people said they're not very connected, I still want to read it so I can know. I want to know all the details. So those were 6 books that I read, loved, and wish I owned a copy of. Let me know, do you guys read more from your library? Do you mostly just buy books that you read? Thank you guys so much for watching. Down below you'll find links to all the books I talked about, as well as my Bookstagram and my Goodreads if you want to follow me there. And I will see you in my next video. Bye!